Hey guys, it's Mr. Walker, and I'm going to go over absolutism. And in going over absolutism, I'm going to compare Louis XIV of France and also Peter the Great of Russia. And so when you think of absolutism, I want you to think of, this is in period 2, is when absolutism is at its height and when it's also challenged. That's why this chapter is called Absolutism and Constitutionalism. That's when absolutism is challenged. And so we're going to look during this time at absolutism. And absolutism, this idea is about a ruler having absolute or complete authority over or supremacy over all aspects of their society. And absolutism, remember we used this word before, consent. And this is in the definition of absolutism by a French jurist, a French legal scholar named Jean Baudin. And he gave this definition of absolutism that consent is not required for that ruler to make decisions. So ruler controls, I'm just going to say controls, and dominates. And so they, so there's no consent under absolutism. It has, I always remember Burger King, or like Taco Bell, supreme or supremacy. They have supreme authority. Okay, and usually what's involved in absolutism is also a concept called divine right. Divine right. And of course, this means that the monarch makes a claim, claims to have a right from God, to have a right to rule from God. Okay, and so these are some basic concepts of absolutism. And then we're going to look at Louis XIV, France. And we're also going to look at Peter the Great from Russia. And when you're looking at absolute rulers, the acronym I wanted you to remember was REINA P. And these are the aspects of society that they control. And so RAENA. And think of this like, because we're studying kings and queens, like, you know, Reina, and then P, we're adding on at the end. And so we've got this aspect of society that they control is religion. They also control the army or the military. They control the economy. They control the nobility or nobles. They control arts and architecture. And they also control the peasants. Because even though we'll be talking about mercantilism and a new form of economic control, there are also aspects of feudalism that remain. So think of the pyramid, the feudal pyramid of owning land and privileges for nobles. And that persists, but the kings are taking power over all of that. And so let's go through Louis XIV first. Both of these rulers overlap. Louis XIV was the longest reigning monarch in Europe. He went from, and I think I'm getting this right, it's something right around here. I'm going to say 1645 to 1715, because he was a boy king during the 30 Years' War, which ended in 1648, and he lasted all the way till 1715. Peter the Great starts 40 years later. He's around 1685, and he goes until 1725. And so that's roughly the time period we're looking at. You can see that one serves longer amount of time, one lasts a little longer, but this is the time period of, and these are really considered the two monarchs with the most power, the examples of absolutism. So over religion, Louis takes control. In the biggest way is that he revokes the Edict of Nantes. Remember his grandfather who issued the Edict of Nantes, Henry IV, that gave religious tolerance to Huguenots or Protestants. Louis XIV revokes it, takes it away. And as a result, there are Protestants who flee France. Protestants flee France, and they go to the Netherlands instead. I'm just writing Nev. The Netherlands during this time is an example of constitutionalism, not absolutism. And here in the Netherlands, they have religious tolerance, and it's good for business. It's bad for French business. A lot of the Protestants are manufacturers, and they leave to go to the Netherlands, and they take their manufacturing knowledge and money with them. He revokes the Edict of Nantes. He also has power over religion because he has the power to appoint bishops. And French kings have had the power to appoint bishops beforehand through what was called the Concordat of Boulogne, power to appoint bishops. And so even though the Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, the French king has the ability to appoint bishops who serve in France. Okay, and so those are two ways that he controls religion. The army, if you remember before the time of Louis XIV, so in the 30 Years' War, you think of mercenary armies. And so instead of mercenary armies, he creates a standing army. And so these are full-time professional soldiers who are trained and disciplined. Okay, and what's the type of army that Louis has? Think of some of the, from the 30 Years' War, there's the similar use of, you've got muskets, they're muskets, and there's also movable cannon, or movable artillery, muskets and cannon, and this idea of a standing army of permanent soldiers, okay, he also has them stationed throughout France, throughout France on bases or garrisons where the military is. And so if we have France here, you have Spain here, one of their enemies, the Habsburgs. You have Switzerland, not much of a problem. You have Italian city-states who France occasionally has squabbles with. You have Austria, the Habsburgs right there. You have England right over there, traditional enemy. You've got the Netherlands, a competitor right there. You've got Prussia up here. And so he'll make garrisons. You'll have a garrison of people there. You'll have a garrison over there. You'll have a garrison on this border. So garrisons, these are where you have the military bases over here, or a naval base here, and a naval base here too, Toulon. And so the purpose of having these different permanent military members is that you can muster your soldiers quickly. You can get them and put them into battle. The other way that this gives him control, not just over the army and to be able to combat neighboring countries, he's also able to control his own country and have the army come out when he wants them. If there's any kind of peasant or noble rebellion, he has soldiers who are loyal to him stationed throughout the country, ready to put down any rebellion. And he lives over here in Paris. Paris is right there. And think of these are like spokes going out like a bike wheel to these different garrisons, and all roads lead to Paris. Okay. So, army. Okay, economy. Ways in that they control the economy. One is that in all absolute monarchs, they create I'm just going to write it under economy. They create bureaucracies. Bureaucracy. This word bureau, in French, it means office. And so it's a And Cressy, think of a pyramid, a hierarchy. And so it's a hierarchy of offices. A bureau, for example, think of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI is centered in Washington, but there are offices all throughout the United States that report to someone higher up. Similarly, the IRS, that's a bureau, the Internal Revenue Service that collects taxes. So whether it's to be an arm of a police, or it's for taxes, or think about the Department of Motor Vehicles. The DMV is also an example of a hierarchy of a bureaucracy of different offices, where there's a state office in the capital and then offices in cities throughout. And this is a way to have uniform laws, also to collect taxes, and so these are purposes of having a bureaucracy, and how it gives a monarch or someone who's in power control over their country. And the creation of bureaucracies, whether it's to give laws or is to collect taxes, or it's for justice or punishment, justice or police. These are all ways in which the building of a bureaucracy influences the power at the very top, these hierarchies, all right? And so there are tax collectors, and the people who started doing this were before Louis XIV. If you saw the 30 Years' War Unit, you know that it's Cardinal Mazarin and Cardinal Richelieu who are starting these bureaucracies, and also setting up, having nobles put their walls down in different cities to try to get more centralizing authority, or more authority from the top, more absolute control over the country. And Louis XIV continues this. When you think of the economy with Louis XIV, the most famous person, his finance minister, is known as Colbert, okay? And what Colbert does is he practices mercantilism. And this is practiced by other European countries, especially France and England, and the same policies are adopted in Russia. The idea with mercantilism is that the first thing about mercantilism is that it collect gold. Whoever has the most gold or bullion or silver wins in the end. The other one is a favorable balance of trade. All right, balance of trade. And by this, they mean they want exports, and we covered this in class, have to be greater than the imports. And there are ways to make your exports, thing that you're selling abroad, because you'll have more money coming into your country if you're selling more to other countries than what you import to your own country. And ways are to do that mercantilists achieved this was to, one is support business at home. So French businesses, especially textiles, England is going to do the same thing. And France also wants to sell its own textiles. And also, besides supporting their businesses, they do this through infrastructure programs too. Infrastructure, this means building, and this time it's building canals and roads that connect different cities to each other, and mines to they're not really factories yet, but at least to manufacturing, to places where manufacturing is done. And the other way is to protect your businesses, not just to put money into them and more training, and not just to build roads, but also to put taxes, or what are called tariffs, on outside goods. Okay, so these are different mercantilist practices that Colbert used in order to support a favorable balance of trade. Yeah, sorry, I should have written favorable. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to collect more gold for your country. And you do that through exporting more than you import, supporting your businesses through infrastructure, canals and roads, and putting tariffs or taxes on outside goods. Is this good for your own people? Well, not necessarily, because if your people could buy a cheaper good that comes in from overseas, they're not going to be allowed to buy a cheaper good because there'll be taxes on it as it comes in. This is actually something that Trump is using to create tariffs today, which, has come under quite a bit of criticism. As well as having gold, this favorable balance of trade, the other part of this has to do with dependent colonies. Dependent colonies. And this is where we talked about like Rapunzel, where Rapunzel is dependent on the mother country. The mother country creates dependency in the colonies. And so the colonies, they can't trade with other nations, and they can't manufacture their own goods. The colonies just produce raw materials or cash crops that are sent back to the mother country and are then manufactured there and sold back to the colonies. So the colonies, this says produce raw materials, and they're not allowed to no manufacturing of their own goods, no manufacturing, and no trade with other countries. They're kept dependent. All right, I'm going to stop right here. So this covers religion, army, and economy for Louis XIV of France.